Yay. Hi there. Hi there. Um, Now I have big time stuck in my head. It's a Peter Gabriel song. Hi there. They're too young. You're all too young. All right. Hi, I'm back. How are you? Okay. I'll assume that means you're wonderful. Transcendent, even. Um, After all, you're watching videos on philosophy. How else would you be other than amazing? Okay. Um, so today we're doing social epistemology. The next video will be standpoint epistemology. Then on bullshit by Harry Frankfurt, and then the last one on echo chambers and epistemic bubbles. So peachy and keen. But today is social epistemology. Um, this might turn into two videos uh, because no, it might turn into two videos. We'll see. Um, Okie pokey. So we had been talking about different notions of justification. We spent most of the semester talking about that. I mean, we talked a little about skepticism, um, but then basically we talked about the taxonomy of justification, basically. We talked about internalism and externalism, the different varieties of theories that you get under those umbrella headings. Internalism, we got, foundationalism and empiricism, which is a type of foundationalism. We talked about coherence theory, which is generally an internalist theory. Um, we talked about reliabilism under the heading of externalism, and we talked about virtue epistemology, which kind of straggles the line depending on whether you're talking about virtue reliabilism or virtue responsibilism. But now, at the very end, for the last few weeks, we are herring off in another direction, and we're going to talk about some. We're still going to be touching on ideas of justification. I'm not saying that's not in there, but we're going to be talking about some other issues and sort of how the stuff that we have talked about, um, talking about the permutations of it, the applications, if you will, so to speak. So that's where we are, and that's what we're doing. Or at least that's what I'm doing. I don't know what you're doing. Um, you might be watching this on double speed. God help you if you do. Um, while you are cooking dinner or something. I don't know, but it's not for me to say. Anyway, social epistemology. All right, let's jump into it. Okay, so the traditional picture of epistemology, going all the way back to Descartes, is the idea of a knower, an epistemic agent, who interacts with something. Let's put a peg in that for the moment. Who interacts with something and thereby gains knowledge. If you are a rationalist, you interact with the logical premises, a priori truths, and you interact with these and you gain knowledge, infallible justification for your beliefs, and therefore you know. If you're an empiricist, through the exercise of your natural faculties, your senses, you gain sensory impressions that form the basis of all knowledge. Okay. Even moving up to like virtue epistemology, if you are a virtue epistemologist, especially a responsibilist, You, as an epistemic agent, you practice your epistemic virtues. You approach the world in a curious and open-minded and even-handed and critically reflective fashion, and thereby gain knowledge. Ba-gum, ba-gum, ba-gum. Okay. A singular epistemic agent who, by interacting with objective reality in some fashion, thereby gains knowledge, justified true belief. So far, so good. This is called the atomistic picture of knowledge. An atom is just being sort of the smallest unit, an individual unit. It's from the Greek. We used to think the atom was the smallest particle of matter in the universe. We now know there are smaller things. But we called them that after the Greek word for an individual unit. And so the atomistic picture of epistemology is not nuclear powered. It is instead a picture of epistemology which says there's an individual agent, sort of epistemically independent, that interacts with the world and gains knowledge through the result of their own efforts or capacities. Okay. Social epistemology? So, take two. Social epistemology suggests that this is never the case. There's no such thing, or at least never in any interesting situations. That the knower, the epistemic agent, is inextricably embedded in inextricably embedded in a web of social relationships. And of course, that part we might be willing to grant as like a by the by, right? Epistemic agents, because they exist as people, are embedded in social relationship webs, fine. But social epistemology suggests that those webs of social relationships are also inextricably bound up in the quest for knowledge, in the processes of justification. That it's not just that I, as a knower, happen to also have webs of social relations, that I am effective and active as a knower in part, or in part, because of my embeddedness in these webs of social relationships, that I would not be effective as a knower without them. Okay. So, that is an interesting thesis. How can they defend this? All right, so here's sort of the basic line on it. Imagine an epistemic agent, a subject. Imagine the real world. There is a connection between them that can be conceived of, like if you're an empiricist, the connection line is the way that physics operates on the real world, and then operates on you as a knower through your senses, and that is your route to gaining information about the real world. And the way you get better at gaining information about the real world is by optimizing whatever process it is that connects you as an agent to the real world. Since empiricists believe that all knowledge is rooted originally in sense experience and then in the mental permutations that we make of our sense experience, you get better knowledge by optimizing the activity of your senses and the way that your brain operates on the activity of your senses. If you are a virtue epistemologist, a responsibilist, you think that you get knowledge, you extract knowledge from the real world by uh, by acting in an epistemically virtuous way, the way that you get more knowledge or more precise knowledge is by optimizing the operation of your epistemic virtues, sharpening your epistemic virtues, getting better at practicing them, so on and so forth. If you are a reliabilist, an externalist reliabilist, and you get knowledge from the real world through reliable, true belief producing processes, then you optimize your knowledge production by just finding more and more reliable processes. Okay. So in every case, under the classic model, there's a knower, there's the real world, there's some kind of connection between them that explains how you get beliefs that correspond to the real world in a justified fashion and are therefore knowledgeable. The social epistemologist suggests that there is a knower, another knower, another knower, another knower, another knower, another knower, etc. And each one of them stands in a relationship to the real world, but they also stand in relationships to each other. So imagine lines coming off of here to each one of these little knowers, and then lines connecting all of these little knowers to each other. The process of being justified in a belief then, you can get beliefs. Atomistically. I can just look around. I don't need someone else around me. I can look around. But the process of being justified is largely or entirely operationalized through your social relationships with other people. Okay. Kind of kooky pants. All right. So let's talk about how that works. Like why think that? All right. Well, there's a couple of very basic reasons to think that. And it largely has to do with a problem that's vexed the empiricists a little bit, which is that obviously there's always the worry. If you treat sense data as foundational, as basic, then there's always the worry that you're doing so illicitly, that your senses are not operating correctly, that you're hearing things, that you're seeing things, that you aren't seeing correctly, whatever. There's always a worry with the basic empiricist picture, that you are that your senses are in error. And of course, one of the easiest error checking mechanisms for my senses is to consult someone else who seems to have reasonably operating senses, who's in the same area you're in. If I think I see something weird out of the corner of my eye, like, ooh, huh? I can say to Morgan, did you see that? And Morgan can be like, no, you haven't slept in 3 days. Get some sleep. If Morgan thinks they are hearing something like music, they can say, hey, can you hear music? And I say, yes, the cats have clearly turned on the radio upstairs. Obviously. They don't want to miss, the morning show with the DJs. Sorry, that's ridiculous. None of us would ever be up in the morning. Absurd. But yeah, we do this all the time. We error check our senses by consulting someone else. But notice what that says about the process of being justified. That I don't think I'm justified in every situation until I have had a chance to check my sensory data against someone else's sensory data. Now, this generalizes to other models of justification. I can believe I am approaching things in an open-minded way, that I am being adequately critical of sources while still respecting expertise, and so on and so on. But it's easier to be sure of this if I am engaged in a dialogue. Well, not a dialogue, it wouldn't be two people. If I am engaged in discourse with a community of knowers who are also attempting to practice epistemic virtue. They can point out to me when I am accepting things too readily, or when I've let my desire to believe something that I want to believe cloud my judgment about how reliable a certain source is, or cloud my judgment about being open-minded when I don't want to, hear something. I'm like, I don't want to believe that. It's too upsetting to think about. So on and so forth. Like David Brooks, the conservative columnist. He sucks, just in general. I don't like him very much. There's a lot. He's sort of a moderate in his views, so I don't think he's a complete wingnut, but there's a lot of issues I disagree with him about. And I would be very hesitant to cite David Brooks as someone like, oh, well, David Brooks said it, so I would be very hesitant on that. But I read an article about some of the issues in higher education. I read an article he wrote for The Atlantic about this recently, and the man is making some really good points. And this infuriates me because this is a man who's also written extensively elsewhere about things like, the evils of marijuana and premarital sex. And I'm like, dude, I'm married, so that's not an issue for me, and I don't use marijuana, so that's not an issue for me. But he sounds like he just stepped out of the, 1940s or something. It's just ridiculous the way he writes about this stuff. So normally I wouldn't be, super enthused about being like, oh, David Brooks, he's the guy. But, he had some good points in this article. And if I'm going to practice the epistemic virtue of being open-minded, I need to pay attention to that. And really, I need to pay attention to what he said and then reflect on it critically. Not just accept it, but to be like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Let's look at it. And it's easier to do stuff like that when you are embedded in a network of other knowers who can call you on your bullshit, so to speak. Who can sort of say, hey, maybe you're overlooking this for an illicit reason. Maybe this isn't the best, reason to be ignoring something. So once again, we have an analogous situation as to with the empiricist case, to where the process of being justified, which in the case of the virtue epistemologist, you're justified in a belief if you have acquired it in a way that you believe or that is epistemically virtuous, and the best way to ensure that you are being epistemically virtuous is to have a community of knowers who are epistemically virtuous, that you are in contact with, and that can give you feedback on your efforts, and that you can give feedback on their efforts, and so on and so forth. So just like with the empiricists double checking the products of their senses with other people nearby, the virtue epistemologist can double check the output or the products of their epistemically virtuous practices, so on and so forth. It generalizes to reliabilism. It generalizes to pretty much this basic observation generalizes pretty much every theory of justification there is. Okay, so far so good. But you may be asking, or you may be saying, surely this doesn't come up in every case. Right? If I'm an empiricist, I only double check my vision and stuff, like if I'm unsure. I don't look over. I don't periodically, from looking at the television, look at Morgan and say, "Is there a television? Are you seeing a television?" I don't if the clock changes. I don't go, "Did you see that?" I'm gonna start. No. No? Okay. I'm being threatened with the spray bottle again. But yeah, I don't do that. So maybe the initial objection here is that the observation made by the social epistemologists is trivial. That we can say yes, when error checking is an issue, social networks of knowers can be important, but they are not necessarily relevant in day-to-day life, in day-to-day epistemic pursuits. Most of the time, you function as an independent agent. And that's possible. At least that's sort of the initial. Make up your mind, cat. Where are you going? Okay, this is Elias. He's our oldest cat. He's about 5 or 6? 5. He's 5, and he's annoying. He's super, super irritating. Anyway. But yeah, so that's the first possible sort of counter move for social epistemology, is to say these webs of knowers are not really relevant most of the time, that our picture of how justification works can remain the same, except in extreme cases. Okay, so that's the first move. How might a social epistemologist respond to this? 3 minutes? Okay, we got groceries coming, so I'll have to pause this here soon. Are you going to go ahead and... Oh, okay. Hang on a minute. I'll be back. I'll pick up with... I'll go ahead and ask some social epistemologists how they respond, and then I'll come back and tell you. Okay, hang on. Alright, sorry. The groceries have been put away. So what would the social epistemologist say in response to the objection that the fundamental observation of social epistemology is true but trivial, true but uninteresting? That, yes, sometimes to be justified, you need to rely upon your social relations in order to double check whatever it is you're normally doing to get beliefs, but those are edge cases, and we don't need to think about them too hard. This is the shape of the response that's usually given. That first of all, the first part of the response is that most of our knowledge is actually acquired socially anyway. That we get far more knowledge from other people than we do from direct observation of the senses, rationalist calculations and deductive arguments, or sort of an independent practicing of virtues. That social relationships are the main source of knowledge. So that's the first. That's the first part of a response. So, what that means as a response goes is to say that no, it's not an edge case when we need to think about how our social relationships are operationalizing justification. It's not an edge case at all. In fact, arguably, the times when it's not social are edge cases. Or at least, if they're not, if we don't want to call them edge cases, we wanted to call them relatively uninteresting cases. Um, like, for instance, empirical observations that I make all the time with my senses are usually pretty routine and uninteresting and provide me with only basic operational data. And everything else is stuff I get through mainly social relationships from other people. Now, if that sounds implausible, I get it, but I'm gonna make the case on behalf of the social epistemologist here in a few moments. The other half of the response that could be made in defense of social epistemology's core insight is that even when we appear to be operating independently, such as if I'm trusting my vision, if I'm an empiricist and I'm trusting the data of my senses, that the main reason I do trust my sense data is that I have learned through cross-checking with other people that my sense data is pretty reliable. And that if I saw something that made me question my senses, it would mainly be because of things I've learned while embedded in a socially based web of knowers. That you learn what is anomalous, that in fact, arguably, you can't learn, or it would be very difficult to learn what counts as anomalous sense data without being embedded in a social network of knowers. That it would be super, super difficult to figure out which sense data is anomalous from a wholly subjective position. That you need an intersubjective exchange in order to understand the boundaries of your senses and sort of when they're reliable and when they aren't, and what kinds of things should make you like start questioning your senses. Okay, so the core in psychosocial epistemology is that justification is operationalized through social relationships. That, in other words, you can't really be justified in any interesting way or interesting case without referencing your social relations. And the rebuttal to that is that, hey, we only really lean on those social relations. We only do that intersubjective check. We use those social relations as an intersubjective check on processes that are fundamentally individual. And the rebuttal to that rebuttal is that no, in fact, our we not only do we get most of our knowledge through these relationships, we only even know when we should start checking whether our epistemic processes have worked properly. We only even know that because of other intersubjective exchanges that have gone on. Okay. All right. So, why should we think? So let's start with the first part of this. Why should we think that we get most of our knowledge through other people? That sounds bonkers, right? Don't I get most of my knowledge through my senses? Isn't that what the empiricists tell me? Don't I get most of my knowledge through these reliable external processes in the objective, in objective reality that funnel information to me that I turn into beliefs that I have credence in because I think the processes are in fact reliable? Okay. In order to answer this, we need to unpack the concept of what's called testimony. Um, Testimony is that part in church where someone comes forward and says how they've been saved. Sorry, that's a different kind of testimony. Although that is the word they use. But that's not what we're talking about here. In the technical sense within epistemology, testimony is just any time another epistemic agent is passing you information directly or indirectly. That is testimony. So let's start with the most basic case of testimony. I just said that thing about giving your salvation narrative in church, and Morgan said no. Morgan was passing me information. Morgan was warning me to stop being a silly Billy, or a silly Sally in my case. I have now formed a belief. Implicitly, Morgan was warning me that I will get squirted with the spray bottle if I continue. And so I now have a belief that I will be squirted with the spray bottle if I continue flogging that testimony joke. And it's probably a true belief, but we'll get into that in a moment. That is a simple case of testimony. One person telling another person something. What I'm doing right now is testimony. You want to know? Well, alright. You may not want to know. But I am forcing you to listen to what social epistemology is. And so you are getting the information from another person. Me. And you're getting it directly. I am telling you directly. Well, actually, if this were an in-person class, it would be direct. It isn't. I'm creating a video that you then watch. So it is kind of indirect. Hopefully you're starting to get an inkling of just how much knowledge you get from other people. Or originally got. Like, there's so much stuff that's just filed away here as knowledge that I originally got from other people. And if we throw in the indirect stuff, then gosh, who knows? The capital of Norway is Oslo. You know what I haven't done? I haven't gone there and checked. I haven't verified it for myself. I haven't gone over like a little virtue epistemologist or something and gone and looked. I get that from other people. And how did I get it? Did someone come into the room and say, by the way, the capital of Norway is Oslo? Did I see it in a video? Not even that. I read it in a book. Books are what we used before we had videos. Okay. Go to the library on the second floor in the Metro building. They'll tell you all about them. But no, books are no different than videos in that sense. They are a way for someone to pass you information indirectly, but you are ultimately still getting the information from a person. Yes, you are using your senses in both cases, but the actual substantive information is not something you gain from your senses. It's not like if I look at a wall and the wall is red and I think I am seeing something red, then the substance of that belief, the important aspects of that belief, are based on the operation of my senses. But if I read a book and the words make up meaning that says the capital of Norway is Oslo, then the shapes of the letters, the font, things like that, in other words, the stuff that I'm directly perceiving with my sight, that's all incidental. You could change the font, you could change the size of the letters, you could change it from printing to crayon, whatever. And I would still get the same information. The information is not something that I perceive with my senses. That's something I cognize. Um, I'm just my vision only enters into it as a way of getting the little signally bits that give me the information. So I'm getting my information from another person. That's the fundamental thing that's happening there is the testimony. The fact that my senses are involved, they're just involved incidentally. Um, you get testimony from books. You get it from people telling you things. You get it from apps. That somebody builds an app to tell you what the weather is. Somebody builds an app on your phone to tell you what time it is. That's testimony, man! Because somebody constructed this thing to pass you certain information. Um, it starts to look like everything is testimony. If I'm driving down the road and I see an orange and black sign that says left lane closed ahead, that's testimony. Somebody made that sign, somebody elected to put it up. They're trying to communicate not just to me, but to everyone who sees the sign. But I saw the sign, and it opened up my eyes. Um, you're too young for that one, too. Watch Pitch Perfect if you want to get that one. Anyway, I can't help myself. Because the okay, but I don't try because I can't. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, signs. Road signs. That's testimony. Shit your parents told you when you were a kid that now seems routine information. Did anyone ever show you how to tie your shoes? Do you still tie your shoes because somewhere in the back of your brain you learned it from another person? Yes. Testimony! Gosh. It's starting to look like we get massive amounts of knowledge from testimony. I get some basic data about the world around me, like if there's an obstacle in my way or whether it's day or night. Like I get some basic data through my senses. But generally speaking, pretty much everything that matters to me, I got in some fashion or another from someone else. Okay. So the first sort of subsequent claim that social epistemology makes in rebutting the charge that it is trivial, the first claim, which is that most of our knowledge is social anyway. Wow, that seems pretty plausible. And then the second claim, which is that the standards that we use to judge whether even our sense data or our virtue regime or whatever, to judge whether they're operating well, those standards are things we have gotten socially. That one also seems pretty reasonable when you start thinking about it. Because how do I know let's imagine I'm walking on the street and I think I see a leopard down on Boston Avenue. I think I see a leopard down on Boston Avenue. And that makes me think I'm seeing things, or that I'm not properly interpreting what I am seeing. So I think I see a leopard. And my instinct is to say, hey, do you see that? Now, again, the people who object to social epistemology would say, okay, that's an edge case. You checked with that person because you thought your senses weren't operating correctly. But why do I think that? Well, because I thought I saw something that shouldn't be there. Why do I think a leopard shouldn't be there? Because I know things about leopards. And I know that they don't belong in a downtown city, especially a downtown city in Oklahoma. But why do I know that? Why do I know that leopards don't roam free in downtown Tulsa? Because of things other people have told me. Because of testimony. Implicit or explicit testimony. I know that leopards are not native to this habitat, but I don't know that because I went out and surveyed a bunch of leopards.
They're really bad about turning the surveys back in anyway.
I don't know if you heard that, but Morgan made it funny. I said I haven't gone out and surveyed a bunch of leopards, and Morgan said they're really bad about turning surveys back in anyway, which, frankly, I find charming. This is why we've been together 17 years. Anyway, um, you can see it. It's delightful. They've cracked themselves up now. Anyway, but yeah, I haven't gone out and researched leopards. Um, I observed them in a variety of areas and learned that their habitat doesn't include downtown Tulsa. I know that leopards are not native to downtown Tulsa because I have like basic facts about leopards and I got those from testimony. We can even dig deeper than that. But before I get to that, so the very reason that I know I need to check my senses is because I know what I'm looking at is a leopard, and I know what leopards look like through testimony, and I know that it doesn't belong there through testimony. Okay. So this so-called edge case is looking a lot less edgy. But even beyond that, I know how to put this. I know how to judge when my senses are operating correctly, um, based on testimony. When I look at the leopard, what I think is a leopard, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think, okay, is that just a cat that I'm seeing and it's closer than I think it is? And I'm going to try and judge this. Now, some of that is coming through personal experience with my own visual capabilities, but some of that is coming from things I have learned as to how to assess my own visual input. I've learned what these things mean. I mean, they teach you when you're young. They teach you shapes and colors, and they show you optical illusions and things, and you learn near and far from Grover, and yeah, I don't know if Grover still goes near and far on Sesame Street, but he should. And if he doesn't, look it up on YouTube. I'm sure it's there. I guarantee you someone has put that shit on YouTube. Because that's very Gen X, and my generation is sort of in charge of everything right now. I'm very sorry. No, the government is still still boomers running the government, but anyway. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, we learn it's not just that we learn facts about the world that can help us judge whether our senses are operating correctly. We learn basic principles of how our senses operate in a social fashion. It's not a totally atomistic process. Well, holy hell, this is starting to look like knowledge is always social. I mean, great googly gumdrops. That's big if true. Um, what are the implications of this in terms of social epistemology? Like, why? What do we do? Like, let's grant the social epistemologists all of their initial claims that we get most of our knowledge through testimony, and that um, even when it seems like we are just relying on things like sense data, um, we're still the way that we interact with our sense data is still socially conditioned. Um, why should we? What do we do now? What is the program of social epistemology? Okay. Well, one direction. I don't know any One Direction songs, or otherwise I'd bust out with lyrics there, because that's a perfect opportunity I gave myself. But anyway, one direction that we can go in is to investigate the concept of testimony, much in the same way that we have investigated the concept of justification. Because it doesn't seem like all testimony leads to true belief. I can tell you things that are false. I can look you in the eye and tell you that I'll have grading done this weekend. Um, Probably not true. Um, so I can give you false testimony. And there are probably situations where if you are given testimony, you should not form a belief on the basis of that testimony. Um, Such as when you ask a little kid, like a 3-year-old kid, what they do for a living, and they say, I drive a truck. I mean, that's probably not reliable. You should not form a belief that they do actually, in fact, drive a truck. Um, that's on you if you believe that. Um, so testimony clearly, there are clearly types of testimony or circumstances in which you should not form beliefs, that you would not be justified. And so investigating that is one thing that social epistemologists can profitably do. Um, I'll loop back around to that here in a minute. Um, Another thing that social epistemologists can do is to investigate the intersubjective nature of justification, and sort of try to unpack all of that. Because now, and to sort of answer questions about whether objective knowledge of any kind is really possible. How far down the rabbit hole do we go? Because once we start to think that even the justification status of beliefs formed off of sense data is socially conditioned, then it really starts to look like the connection that we and other knowers have to the real world is, it's starting to look like a very minority player in the overall picture of knowledge formation. And that's a little troubling, because what we want, ideally, is to gain knowledge about the world outside of us. That's what we're after, right? We're after true beliefs. True beliefs about the world. And previous theories, pre-social epistemology theories that focused on the individual knower, they painted a very rosy picture of a person coming into closer and closer contact noetically with the world around them. And now it's starting to look like it's starting to look like you know, a crappy Christmas gift that people just re-gifted in the same social circle. Um, Rather than something, an actual objective relation to the external world. It looks like we're all just talking to each other. But about what? Somebody's got to be in connection with the real world out there, right? Presumably we all are to some extent. But then everything about how we interpret, I mean, right down to interpreting our basic sense data, uh, seems to be dependent on social structures and social facts. Like, for instance, if I touch, well, okay, so that's too complicated an example to go into. How about this? If I start to feel inexplicably angry, and that's a purely internal feeling, that's not, that's not something someone is telling me that I'm angry. You're angry. I'm not getting that from anywhere else except for my internal emotional states. If I start to feel inexplicably angry and pissed off at the world, I might interpret it, I might decide to understand what's happening as maybe lack of sleep or low blood sugar, right? What's the old saying? If you hate everyone, eat something. If you think everyone hates you, sleep. Um, so that's the. I mean, and there's a lot of truth in that, especially for me. I get hangry. Speaking of which, I'm really hungry. Okay. We're gonna eat as soon as I'm done, so I'm gonna wrap up quick. And that's social epistemology. No, I'm sorry. I have to finish my thought. If I start to get inexplicably angry, I might interpret it as low blood sugar. Especially if there doesn't seem to be anything provoking my anger, like other people driving in front of me. Um, that's just reasonable. Um, yeah, I would interpret that as low blood sugar. But that is an interpretation based on things that I have learned socially, that I've learned through testimony. Um, I don't automatically gain insight into even my own emotional states. Even my internal states are interpreted based on things I've learned through social channels. If I lived in a different time period or a different social milieu, I might interpret inexplicable anger in my that I'm feeling as demonic spirits urging me to sin. Right? There's a devil whispering in my ear, telling me to be angry. It wants me to sin. Um, it's not low blood sugar. What the hell is blood sugar? Right? I'm a medieval peasant. I don't know what blood sugar is. I don't know what Netflix is. There's a lot of stuff going on now. Um, and where did the medieval peasant get the idea that a sudden, inexplicable feeling of anger was caused by supernatural forces? They got it socially. They got it through testimony. Where did I get the idea that a sudden, inexplicable anger was caused by low blood sugar? I got it socially. I got it through testimony. Um, it's starting to look like the the social aspect of knowledge is totalizing, that it runs from top to bottom, that even introspectively, uh, even when I'm taking introspective data, I am invoking the sort of the my internal model of the rest of society that I carry around in my head in order to understand it. So, whew, that's heady stuff. Um, that's a lot to think about. That maybe uh, we need to unpack that. How much how much are we coming into contact with the real world, and how much are we coming into contact with just a socially created paradigm of knowledge? And this, of course, this goes all the way up and down the scale. There are social standards for how to interpret what you read. There are social standards for how to interpret what you see, what you feel, how to interpret testimony given to you. It's top to bottom. Like I said, it's totalizing. Um, and so, how do we investigate those standards while being embedded in them? How do we come to understand and critique them? And what does it mean? Uh, like, what does it mean to refine them? Why is my understanding of my uh, sudden and inexplicable anger any better or worse than the medieval peasant's understanding of it? Presumably, I think my interpretation is better. But do I just think that because I am embedded in a socially constructed web of epistemic standards that, of course I think that my interpretation is a better one because of all these other beliefs that I have that are connected to the same overall interpretive regime. This gets us back into coherence theory and a particularly social slant on it, where we stop thinking of coherence theory as just where we stop thinking of coherence theory in terms of just a network of propositional beliefs, and we start thinking of coherence theory as a network of epistemic standards and the beliefs that cohere with them. Okay, so the last thing that social epistemology can really investigate profitably is the how we get knowledge of, or what knowledge of socially constructed facts would even mean. What does it mean? Do we care about it? Let me give you an example. I'm really into women's gymnastics, men's gymnastics too, but mostly women's. I'm really into gymnastics. If I see someone do a gymnastic routine on a balance beam in a competition, I can go, oh, that looks like a very impressive routine. Or I can go, oh, she fell off the beam. That's probably not a good thing. I can exercise some basic evaluations, but that's about it. Um, an expert, an expert gymnast or a judge of gymnastics, most of whom are former gymnasts, or a coach or somebody like that, can look at a routine and make a pretty good guess at like what score it would get. Like, oh, that's a 12.5 routine, or oh, that's a 13.6 routine, or something like that. Because they know what the standards are. But the idea of something being a 12.5 routine, that's not an objective, natural fact about the universe. There's no such thing as it's not as if the judges sat down and looked at it and discovered that this is a 12.5 routine. Like it always was, and now they know it. It is a 12.5 routine because the experts said it is. You see where I'm going with that? Morgan names all of the Scuffies. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. I didn't just have a stroke. Morgan names all of the Scuffies. That's a terrible example. That had a name. The one Scuffy that is a licensed character that had a name already. Okay. This is Wally. Wally is a lying squishable. Um, Morgan named Wally. Morgan did not look at Wally and discover his name. Morgan didn't like put Wally under a microscope and take a scuffing test and send out or squishable DNA or anything like that. Or Morgan can scan Wally and then go, oh wow, it turns out the lion's name is Wally. That's not what happened. Morgan looked at Wally and conferred the name. Conferred. Conferred the name Wally upon the Scuffy. Why is this Wally named? Why is this Wally? Why is this Scuffy named Wally? Why is that this Scuffy's name? I'm waiting for someone to answer.
Go on.
No? You're not going to answer?
No.
Why is this the Scuffy's name? Because Morgan said it was. Why is that a 12.5 routine? Because the experts said it was. And the thing is, it's not merely an opinion in the same sense as we usually think of opinion. Like, it's not the case that someone else could come along. Like, it's not the case that someone else could come along and go, well, I think it's a 15.2 routine. That the 12.5, that's just your opinion. I say it's 15.2. That's my opinion. Like, the person who says it's a 15.2 routine is just wrong. Just like the person who says that the Scuffy is named Herbert is wrong. The Scuffy is named Wally. It's not named Herbert. So we're not talking about something that is merely an opinion. It is a fact that this is named Wally. It is objectively true that this is named Wally. It's objectively true that routine is a 12.5. But it is objectively true because of social actions, because of things that people did or decided. In other words, this is a socially constructed fact. Morgan and I are married. But that's not, that's not a natural fact about the universe. It's an objective fact, but it's not a natural fact. It's an objective fact that is socially constructed. We are married because of things that we did and because of things that other people who had the proper authority to do them did. And the only way we can understand not only the existence of those facts, but the way that you come into epistemic contact with them is through social epistemology. That's the only way we can really understand that. There's no way to sort of conceptualize of what it means to have that kind of knowledge without social epistemology. Okay, so assuming we grant the two major claims of social epistemology, which is that we get most of our knowledge through testimony anyway, and that even when it comes to non-testimonial sources of knowledge, the standards we use to interpret and interact with those sources of information are socially devised. even when, if we grant those two things, it raises the question, well, what then? What is social epistemology going to do now that we've granted it is a legitimate field of inquiry? And three things that immediately come to mind are uh, unpacking testimony, the different varieties of testimony, why we would consider some testimony to be reliable or unreliable, when we are justified in forming beliefs based on testimony, and so on. The second thing is to investigate exactly how it is that social standards play a role in the interpretation and evaluation of seemingly non-social sources of information, like our senses. Um, like how much of a role does it play, and should that make us worry about skepticism? Should we worry that we are just embedded in varieties of uh, different delusions that are socially woven illusions? Should we worry about that? How can we ever escape the web of the socially constructed web of standards and interpretations to sort of get to the idea of what's really out there? And the third thing that social epistemology can do is to say more about socially constructed facts, about things that we do care about knowing about. A lot of things that we know about and care about knowing about are socially constructed. And so the only way to come into noetic contact with these things is through social epistemic approaches, because they don't exist in the natural world. There's no way, even if we had a sort of uh, natural sources of information, and we do to some extent, um, but maybe only to some extent. Um, Even if we had that, then we wouldn't come into contact with social facts, these socially constructed facts, because they don't exist in the natural world. They exist only in the social space created through interactions. So those are the things that social epistemology can do. Um, this is going to go into two videos, which is okay because in my in-person class, the overview of social epistemology took one whole session, and then in the next session we got with testimony. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do testimony for the next video. Um, and that's just one small slice of social epistemology, but it's what we're going to talk about. And the rest of social epistemology, it's something you can get in an upper division philosophy class maybe, or you can read on your own. So, anyway, all right. I think that's everything for this video. I'm going to get something to eat because I am getting hangry. Or I have demons telling me to sin. All right, have a good one. Bye.